What's up, everybody? It's Cloaken. It's Memorial Day. This is episode 3 for Meet the Mastermind, and we're here on a holiday. And I'm excited because this is our first time to interview a member of the Super Evil team that has been around for quite some time. No newbies like myself, Eduardo, or Jean-Eric on our previous episodes. We've got George Liu, also known as Zekent, for those of you from the Vainglory community. This gentleman is our lead game designer from Super Evil, and I'm super psyched to have you, man, on this holiday. So thanks for joining me and spending your off hours to talk a bit. So hope you're doing well today.
Yeah, no problem. I'm doing pretty well today. It's been a pretty nice weekend so far.
I
Weather's
can
really
tell,
nice, but we can't go out, so it's just nice seeing it through the window.
yeah, I can tell by your shirt that you've been
Yeah,
hyperactive. It's
I'm quite ready for the weekend.
fair enough, dude. Well, yeah, man, I'm very interested in learning your story. I've been able to, in the busy days of our work, pick up tidbits here and there, and I think Vainglory as a game and as a community during the time that you guys were serving the game actively was
Mhm.
something I was aware of and certainly appreciative of in terms of its place in the industry and all of those things. And Patrick is a friend of mine, but I wasn't involved in the day to day. It wasn't something I was hyper tuned into. So this is going to be a fun interview for me because I want to hear a little bit more about that time in your life, what it was like for the company, how things have changed, how we've grown as a team as well. And I think you're going to be a really great source of that kind of information. So thanks for being here, man. And let's talk about games in general, dude. Like, I'm very curious how your journey began on this game development kind of road, because I understand you've had quite a few various turns, whether that's as a player to a content creator to now a game designer. But walk me through how this all began for you. Like, where did it start?
Oh boy. Okay, so this starts about, say, 10 years ago. I graduated from college. I had a major in economics and communications. So I was originally planning on going to marketing or whatnot, potentially going to accounting or potentially becoming a teacher. Um, Shortly after college, I ended up doing some tutoring for kids after school.
Hmm.
I also worked at a small tech startup. We built like computer chassis, which was sort of related to tech, I guess, but not completely. But during that time, I actually found myself streaming. I found that to be really interesting. I built up a pretty big community on Twitch, and eventually was streaming full time, and that was quite a lot of fun. But I wanted to do a little bit more.
Yeah.
Um, and actually was reached out to by EA to test out one of their upcoming titles, which was Dawngate, which is a story for a little bit later in this.
Yeah.
But as they were reaching out to me, I also was reached out to by Team Curse, which is now Team Liquid, asking if I wanted to try out for a spot on their LCS team.
Wow,
And
man.
figured, yeah, I figured, hey, I'm never gonna get a chance like this again, so why not take it? Take them up on the offer. And that actually led me to becoming the support player for their League of Legends team. So
Like,
I,
I'm gonna take a time here for you. I have so many questions about all of this, and I want to I want
all
to stop
right,
you because I want to ask. But like, first off, so many amazing things you've already mentioned. But let's start with economics. Like, what was it about economics that drove you? Because I think there's
ooh,
something about your mind as it relates to, I don't know. I've had the opportunity to sort of see your mind work around the design space a little bit, and then this is interesting for me to learn. Like, why economics? What was it? What was it about that attracted you in school? Like,
this is a little bit tricky because at the time when I first started, it was more of a I have no idea what I want to major in. So
yeah.
economics seemed like something that would
It
be
seemed
interesting to
dutiful
me.
and like appropriate. It seemed,
Yeah, yeah. It was more of like I always enjoyed math, so
mm,
it felt like something that could kind of transition me pretty well into college life and potentially a career in the future.
yeah. Now the communications piece and games in general, like that leap between like not being a content creator and then just all of a sudden streaming, but not just streaming, but also playing games. Like I feel like there's a chunk there, like, and then like to get invited to join a pro team, like you have to have. I'm assuming you were a pretty avid gamer prior to all of this. Like, is that the case? Like, how did that leap go from the confidence to stream, but then also to play? And then clearly you must have been playing at a pretty high level. Like, how much of a gamer were you during college prior to that? Like, what was your gaming life like during this season as well?
Oh man. Okay, so I probably grew up playing way too many video games to the point
Okay.
where my parents would sometimes, lock away the console and,
Yeah.
stop me from playing.
Yeah.
But growing up, I played a lot of Blizzard titles actually. So
Hmm.
Diablo 2, StarCraft, Warcraft. I never actually got into World of Warcraft because it was coming out around the time I was getting into college, and I figured I would never get any work done if I started playing. Which all my housemates played, so I still got no work done when they were playing because I would just watch them raid.
That's hilarious. But smart
Yeah.
decision on your part. I'm sure you did save yourself quite a number of efficient hours in your or productive hours of your life by making that decision.
Hey, it might be a little bit productive, but some fun here and there is good too.
Yeah, yeah. No, fair enough, man. Like
Um,
that game definitely changed my life in many, many ways. So, well, that's cool. So you were an avid gamer. It sounded like you grew up on consoles, but when did you make the shift to PC? Was that something that happened during school? Was that something that happened during this time after school?
it's actually probably in middle school and high school when my
Okay,
family actually got a PC.
sure, fair enough.
Um, and after that, I started playing a lot of Diablo 2. I played a lot of MMORPGs in general. So I kind of knew how much of a time sink they could be and how
Yeah,
much I enjoyed playing them because there's so much, especially the community aspect of it, where you can make a lot of friends online. And a lot of the older MMOs, a lot of people just sat in town just chatting, which was fantastic. And
yeah,
I really loved that.
yeah. So true. Like early WoW and EverQuest, like all those games, even Ultima Online. Like there was so much to the social aspect of those games that I don't know. I think in the focused efficiency of our MMO game time these days, it's easy to kind of lose that or
Oh yeah,
undersell the value of those things. And that's what's been so cool to watch Classic kind of come back in that way. Is
oh
people
yeah.
realizing like, oh man, we've been missing this whole side of this experience. But okay, so you're working on building PCs. You decide to stream. How long was this season of kind of being a public face streaming? And your connection with Curse, like when
Ooh.
did that happen? Or how long was that season?
All right, so I probably streamed, I guess, professionally for about, I think it was about 2 years, maybe a little bit longer.
Wow.
So it was pretty substantial. And prior to that, I actually had a little bit of competitive experience playing games. I used to play, well, I played a lot of Dota, didn't really compete in that, but I played a lot of Heroes of New Earth.
Oh,
And I was on
nice. Yeah.
there was not a huge competitive scene for that, but I played competitively. Though my apartment internet was not the best at the time, so lagging during tournaments is not fun.
Did you know a gentleman by the name of Wade Penfold or Dreadnought? He became a
Ooh.
Heroes content creator, or he became a Heroes pro player, and then a streamer. But he was also a big Han player as well. This was early on in Han days too, though, so there may have been missing overlap.
The name sounds a little bit familiar, but I don't think I'm particularly familiar with them.
All good, man. I was just more curious to see if those sides of our worlds connected in some way.
Yeah.
Dude, that's super cool. Now, talk to me about streaming because I have a few friends who are streamers, and this is a side of our industry and the way that people consume games that I find very fascinating. And now, of course, it's grown a lot, probably even since the time that you were doing it. But talk to me what that season of your life was like. How much were you doing it? How often were you doing it? How pressured did you feel to do it consistently? Like, what was that side of your work life like? Particularly now that you're in a more, I guess you would say, traditional work scenario. You know, how did you talk? How can you talk about that time in your life? Was it hard? Was it stressful? Was it full on enjoyable? Like, where did the joy and work kind of collide? Because clearly gaming is something we do because we enjoy it, but when you're streaming there's a work component there, there's a performance component there. Like I would just love to hear your thoughts around streaming a little bit and what that was like for you.
Yeah, for sure. So I think initially it wasn't too stressful because I wasn't doing it full time. I was mostly just doing it as kind of a fun thing to do.
Mm.
But the reason I started was because I had climbed pretty high in the ladder on League, and a lot of my friends were like, "Hey, why don't you just stream a little bit so we can just watch you play?" It was mostly just to stream for my
Ah,
friends.
I see.
Um, and eventually I realized that, I was pretty good at League. So I started writing a couple guides, and especially one guide that I wrote about Poppy, which was like a pretty niche champion at the time, where no one really played them. And that guide got like a ton of views.
Mm.
And drew some eyes of like the pro players at the time, and people kind of pointed people over to watch my stream, and my stream kind of blew up that way. But after that, then I kind of realized, hey, maybe I could make a living off of this.
Yeah.
So first of all, I talked to my parents and like, hey, I'm going to take 6 months and just try this. If this works, I'm going to continue with it. If
And
not,
what was their take? Well, I'm curious about that. What was their take? Were they like, what? Video games? Like playing? What is this?
I think at the time they were very skeptical. But I was like, hey, this is my plan. I kind of laid it out for them. Like, if this, generates any sort of income, then I'm gonna see if I can pursue this as a at least temporary career. If not, then I will, continue finding more traditional careers to kind of pursue.
Yeah.
But I think they were mostly supportive.
That's awesome. Would you describe yourself as like I mean, I'm making some assumptions here, but I want to get your take on this. Would you describe yourself as sort of a cerebral gamer, meaning like, was it always sort of in your instincts to sort of unpack efficiencies and, how stats interacted, things like that? I think about that a lot in relationship to someone like Ciderhelm, like Patrick, because knowing Patrick prior to his content creation days, like he was just very wired to think about things hyper analytically, and how systems interacted, and the benefits of X choice over Y. Is that a similar place for you in terms of how you interact with games?
Oh, absolutely. So this is actually kind of funny because one of the first things I told Steve, who was the team manager of Curse at the time, when they wanted to recruit me, was, "Hey, I'm terrible mechanically. Like my mechanics in any game I play are not good. I'm like, my APM is low, but I will be able to tell the team what to do to get us to win."
That's
And
amazing.
he was like, "That's exactly what we need right now." So I was on a team because of that.
That's amazing. So the clicking of the buttons and the use of the mouse, like maybe not the strong point, but the analytics and the breakdown, right? That's so cool, man. And how awesome to know that that strength alone is enough to. I mean, I'm sure these days, as esports has sort of grown, you need a bit of all of it. But that at the time, that was enough to get you a seat on a pro team, or at least
Yeah, it was
working with them.
actually it was pretty gratifying because the way I usually play games is just very much min maxing, finding out the most optimal strategies at any given time, and I would, in theory, like people say like solo queue is a bad experience in many MOBAs, but I actually enjoyed it a lot because it meant that I could always like out strategize enough people that my team would generally win.
Yeah, dude, that's like that's your play space, man. Like solo queue is where you're in the wild and you get to put all of your smarts to their most effective use, which is super cool, dude.
Yep.
Well, that's awesome. So this season of pro play or working with Curse, like how long was that for you? And what was the LCS experience like? What is the year, by the way? Like what years are we talking about right now? If you can recall? By the way, dates are completely muddy in my brain as well, so it's okay.
Roughly 2014,
2014.
15-ish.
Okay.
From, or like 2013, I have no idea, but
Yeah.
it was like a September to roughly like April.
Okay. So a short season, right?
Yeah.
Like it wasn't too hyper long. Yeah. What was that like? What was working with that team? Practice schedule, things like that. Again, this is another interesting side to our industry's ecosystem. There's content creation on the streaming side, but then pro play and the amount of time and sort of energy and effort and that goes into that is pretty extensive. What was that like for you?
It was a pretty interesting experience just because I mostly joined because I thought it would be an interesting experience and I wanted to try it out. And so the first thing that happened was I flew down to the gaming house in Las Vegas, which is much less fun to live in than it is to visit, just for anyone who was asking. But in general, like Vegas houses are, pretty cheap relative to anywhere else. And so we basically lived in a mansion, which was really cool. There's like a pool in the backyard. There was probably at least like 8 rooms. But most of the day to day was just starting around, say, 1:00 p.m. We would either find teams to scrim or we would just play solo queue. But if like a team canceled on us, then we would just play solo queue or duo queue or whatnot. But if we had a team to practice with, we would just play 3 or 4 or 5 games, just back to back, and kind of refine our strategies that way. Overall, I think the ecosystem is a lot more developed now. Back when I was playing, there was like a coach, but it was much less like, I guess, regimented than I imagine teams are now, where they have like gaming facilities, they have separate living spaces for players and whatnot.
Yeah.
Um, but at the time, I thought it was actually quite fun. It
Yeah.
definitely wears on you a little bit to like scrim for say 7 or 8 hours and then play more solo queue to practice. But
Yeah.
it's an interesting lifestyle.
Man, it's so I love thinking about this time because my passion around esports was centered around StarCraft and StarCraft 2
Mhm.
early on. And of course, I worked on StarCraft 2 at Blizzard, and it's been so interesting to watch the evolution of how teams collaborate and work. In fact, I did a whole podcast in my other life with Dreadnought, the same gentleman I was telling you about, where
Yeah.
we talked about and reflect on the team ecosystem and how this idea of team houses and where do coaches fall in this, like the idea of how do you mature a team around the idea of teamwork and
Mhm.
coordination and collaboration and support and the whole no I in team thing in a digital ecosystem, right? This is
Right.
very challenging, and it's something that, like, when you think about the roadmap of growth for the competitive ecosystem around this, it wasn't like there was some you know, guide.
Yeah.
There was very motivated young individuals who, and ambitious businesses who see the opportunity to make some money or build a brand. But this
Mhm.
idea of, well, how do you take a bunch of youngsters and get them to work together as a team in a digital competitive ecosystem is very, very strange. Like,
Oh
and I
yeah.
think it's taken a long time for us to find a healthy path or a mature path towards that, rather than just like throwing stuff at a wall and hope it sticks and hope we're
Mhm.
successful, right? Like, did you feel some of that growing pains during that time? Like, how was it relating with your teammates? Were there challenges like so and so doesn't clean the bathroom, like all the way to how you collaborate, and how did that impact your time working together on in the
Mhm.
game? I think it's kind of interesting to me, this season of like team houses and the fact that you live together but then you also play together, and there's an opportunity for true strength in that way, like if you have
Mhm.
someone kind of helping you work through your issues, but there's also a lot of opportunity for true strife, right? Like,
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of it was kind of handled by the team manager, where a lot of like the household needs in general were kind of taken care of. Like there's a housekeeper, we
yeah.
would just order food or just go out and buy food real quick, and that was mostly just expensed. But there was definitely opportunities to have like a little bit more conflict within the team, where it's like, hey, let's try this strategy, but not everyone agrees with it, or not everyone's on the same page, and sometimes those can lead to like a couple arguments here and there. I don't think there's anything too like dramatic. It was mostly
Sure.
just like a difference of opinion on how we should try things. And some people are more heated than others when discussing, but I don't think anything came to like shouting matches or anything.
Yeah. Let me ask you, did you play at any big lands during the season in your life? Were you at any massive live events, and what was that like for you, like some of those first experiences doing that?
I actually played at a couple lands. I can't remember. I think I played at PAX.
Nice.
There
Cool.
was like LNG or something. This wasn't with Team Curse, it was before that.
Sure.
But with Team Curse, I played in the LCS on stage a couple times. And that was actually a really interesting experience, just because like, hey, you're not really, it's kind of like their monitor, their setup. You can bring your keyboard and your mouse, but it's not completely like, your thing, which I feel like makes a little bit of a difference,
Totally.
but nothing huge. It's also really interesting just because, I mean, if you're on a land environment, everything's reaction matters so much more. And
Mhm.
if I'm slow, it's like amplified by that much.
That's hilarious, man. A couple of thoughts on that. Like, I have some StarCraft friends who used to practice at home in like the worst chair possible, right?
Yeah, yeah.
They would practice at home where the table was 2 inches higher than normal, or like they would do these things to like intentionally wreck their ability to play in order to
Uh,
ensure that when they got to that situation where someone was like, yeah, sorry, you're sitting on a cardboard box, they wouldn't be like they wouldn't be like, oh no, okay. They would be ready, right, mentally.
yeah.
And for StarCraft, that's such a huge thing, because it's, as a 1v1 game, like your mentality, your ability to kind of be calm-minded and efficient in your decision making. Like, it's very, very important. And you
Mhm.
can't be sitting there blaming like, oh, this keyboard, or oh, that light, or oh,
Exactly.
this. Yeah, it's like, so I love that side of like competitive games, and how do you prepare for that? How do you anticipate those kinds of things? Because yeah, you get to that situation and you all of a sudden realize like, oh, I took that for granted, or I didn't
Mhm.
realize that was
Mhm.
something I kind of leaned on. And how interesting to experience that in real time. It's super
Yeah,
cool.
absolutely. It's quite interesting anyway,
Yeah.
where I never really realized like, hey, this small little difference makes a much larger difference in like a live environment where it's like, hey, my mouse doesn't click quite the same way, or like it's a little bit colder than I expect it to be. Like that's the strangest thing. Like every single place I've played in, it has been freezing, which makes sense because there's a ton of computers, but I am not used to that.
Yeah, that's why the whole hand warmer thing is like,
Yes.
a lot of people think that that's like, oh, these gamers, and it's like, no, it's the real deal. I get
Mhm.
that.
They have like AC on full blast. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, it's the real deal, man. Well, very cool. Esports is a true passion area of mine. I find it fascinating. I find it troublesome. I find it like amazing. There's so much that we could talk about there, but we're obviously here to talk about games and making games. And I'm very interested in this next portion of your life. Like, it
Mhm.
sounded like EA reached out to you at some point as well. You did some testing with Dawngate. You did some of that. Like, how did you begin to migrate into a more official game dev capacity? Was it immediately with Super Evil and Vainglory? Like, was it something else? Like, what was the time after your pro play season? What did that look like for you?
It was actually almost immediate with EA, where after I left Curse, I was almost immediately reached out to by Andy Belford, who reached out to me from EA, saying like, "Hey, do you want to come help us at?" Well, this is I was going to PAX
Mm.
just to hang out with people, but I realized that EA had a booth set up there for Dawngate, and I realized that they were there, so I offered to help them out a little bit. Excuse me. And after that, because I was already talking to them about potentially having a position there prior to me joining Team Curse, they just reached out again and said, "Hey, do you want to come on as like a community manager?"
Mm.
And I was like, "Hey, this is my first foot in the door, so why not? This is a pretty good opportunity."
Awesome, dude. So you started through the angle of community management, which is kind of interesting
Right.
because publishing and community was sort of my entryway as well, which I find fascinating, and such a challenging and important job in
Yes.
game development. Dude, you've really seen all sides. Like, I actually kind of, your story is fascinating to me because I relate to it in many ways. Like, there's some elements of the all sides of this that I think you see in ways that I've also seen. But talk to me about community management, man. Like, what was that like for you? Um, yeah. Where were the hard parts? Where were the pain points? Where were the joys? Yeah, the ups and downs. I want to hear them.
Ooh. Well, as you may know, Dawngate was eventually shut down.
Yes. Yeah.
So the entire studio was shut down. But prior to that, it was actually a lot of fun because we were able to go to a lot of events. So PAX, we were able to go to Gamescom,
Mm.
and especially seeing a very small and organic community grow was really quite enjoyable. Where every single small thing we did, like, hey, as a dev, you respond to like a forum post or you do like a live stream, which we actually did pretty regularly. I think we did one almost every day of the week where
Mm.
someone on the team would be streaming, either just playing games or talking a little about their work and kind of showing off like, hey, this is what's coming next. Um, and it's really enjoyable seeing that the same few faces just constantly show up and be like, hey, we're really excited to see what's next. And being able to support that growth was really, really fun.
Dude, it's so cool. And I find games very fascinating to me in terms of how personal they are to people, and this
Mhm.
idea of how critical the role is of someone who's sort of serving as a mediator between the actual game experience, but then the personal experience of how we relate to um, the community, and the community relates to the developer. It's a very critical part of what games mean to people, particularly
Mhm.
as they become more and more important in individuals' lives. And so, having kind of been at the helm of that importance, I'm curious to get your take on, what are the things that you feel like developers should be doing to foster positive community relationships? What's too much? Where's the line? Isn't it really all about the games? Like, why spend time on all of these other things? Like, and where is too much? Where is, we've crossed the line? Now I think about the stories I used to hear around Red 5 and
Mhm.
free what was the name, what was the game, Firefall,
Oh
where it was
yeah.
like they had the official cosplay program, and then they had the West Coast Customs land bus, and they were driving around with that thing, and it's like, okay, wait a second, are we building video games, or are we doing something else? And you know I'm curious to get your take on that. Like, where is the importance of this all? Because clearly we're doing a content piece right now for the community, but like, why do it? Where's the line? How much is too much? What is the importance of it?
Yeah, I think generally just being very like open and honest with the community is good. Where it's nice to be able to hold some things back just to make it like nice big reveals and whatnot, but kind of bringing them along for the journey is quite a lot of fun because they feel a lot more invested in, hey, we're thinking about doing X, Y, and Z next. Which one what would you like to see? Things like that actually make me personally, as a player, if I see a dev do that, it makes me feel a lot more invested in that game and a lot more invested in the future of that game because I know I know that they're kind of working on something that I want to see.
Mm,
Um, excuse me. But from the dev side, it's also very important to kind of like manage expectations where you can't just promise everything because it's impossible. Like there's only
yeah,
limited amounts of time in the world. You can only do so much, and you can't just drag people from one project to another without a clear guide.
yeah,
Um, but being able to say, hey, this is roughly the direction that we're heading. This is kind of a feature that we've been planning, but it might have to hold off a little bit. Just wait on it because we know we want to do it. We know you want to see it. Things like that. I think just letting people know that they exist
yeah.
and there are really cool things coming is important.
It's interesting. Yeah, you're speaking to an element of this that I love about games, which is the fact that they are living and evolving creations, right? Like they're interactive, living pieces of art nowadays, where it isn't just the single offering, it isn't just the boxed product that you're getting, but you're actually getting this element of service, or this element of extended evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that right there is, to your point, I think the thing that makes that relationship so important is because it's not just a one and done. Here's your, you think about a typical business transaction. I go to a store, I ask for a product, I get it, I pay my money, I either like it or I don't.
Yep.
But games are so much more human and so much more personal because of how they evolve and grow, and the decisions that are made that affect that growth, right? And
Yeah, I completely agree.
it's so makes game development so interesting and so human and so personal in some ways, particularly
Mm-hmm.
when the people who love your games love them so deeply, like deeply enough to build their lives around them, or commit their lives to content creation or competitive gaming, like all of these things where it's like, this game is now the foundation of livelihoods for others in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, it makes that whole aspect of what we do really important. How we communicate, how we keep people informed, how we listen to suggestions and feedback. Yeah, it's really, really good stuff. What do you think was the biggest shock to you transitioning from being in front of the dev line to behind the dev line? Like, community managers do get to see quite a bit of this,
Mm-hmm.
where you're like, maybe some of those questions that carried over from you as a gamer or as a consumer of games to now a maker of games, or someone who's invested in that side of it. What were some of the biggest eye-opening things, like where you were like, holy smokes, making games is super hard, like I didn't realize how challenging this was? Or did you have any of those moments? Was there ever a little bit of like, dude, I wish the world could understand that, I didn't know, but now I know? Like, did you have some of those?
I think the I think the biggest thing is the word just. Just do this. Yeah, I'll take a couple months, a couple weeks at least.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't like as a player, like I did not realize how I guess difficult some things would be. It's like,
Mm,
hey, just do this one small change. Sure, if we change all that and that and that and that and go back to that and oh shoot, that broke.
yeah. Man, it's such
It's
an interesting,
interesting.
yeah, it's such an interesting to be in position to be in as a developer too, because you don't want to be the guy that's like, okay, here's why, because you said, well, we could do that, but then we have to change this. You start to sound like this, like, I don't know, you start to sound like you're trying to overly justify why you don't want to do it. And
Right.
sometimes the devs really do want to do it. But it's hard.
Yeah.
there's a stack of rank list of things that are a mile high that you need to get to. And instead of trying to spend the time justifying, here's why, and sound like that, like annoying naggy thing, you just say, no, we can't do that now, or we're putting it on hold. Like it's become simplified in a way that's like understandable.
Oh yeah.
Because to like communicate it further than that is like almost annoying, right? Like, were there any other moments like that? I think that's a huge point. This idea of like just do this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just seeing how skilled people are at their craft, like
Mm,
especially watching artists. I love watching artists. Like I would not be able to come anywhere close to the amount of like inspiration or details or just like crazy ideas that they have, and it's really enjoyable just to watch them work.
yeah. Yeah, games again, so fascinating, the marriage of art and tech in this way, because you get these personalities who maybe don't typically collide, like this like overly creative and then overly technical personalities that are now like, okay, work together.
Yes,
It's
yes.
like, oh wait, really? Okay, well, I guess we should figure out how to communicate. Like, and yeah, to your point, you end up rubbing shoulders with people who think and work in ways that are very different to you,
Yeah,
just
even in
because.
design, I
Yeah.
think there's always people who are more like, I feel like we should do this.
Mm.
And I'm much more on the side of like, the numbers say this,
Mm.
numbers should be this and this because of this X, Y, and Z reason. As opposed to like, in my heart, I feel that, we should buff this character because of whatever reason.
Yeah, man, particularly when it comes to balance, I think that is a whole other world. I remember asking David Kim about StarCraft 2 in terms
Mhm.
of balancing decisions for a game like that, where you have this tension, this trilogy of tension between the three races and how they all relate in their build orders and timings and all this stuff. And when do you decide to make a decision to make a change? And is it just by the numbers, or is it ever so much pressure publicly from people that the decision to make a change is to prove that you're listening? But then how do you make sure that your change that you're making is enough that it doesn't swing it so far, but it's enough to prove that you're listening, even if you feel like that was the wrong decision, right? Like there is a whole human element around game balance, particularly with
Mhm.
games that people are passionate about, that isn't as simple as like, what do the numbers say sometimes? Because
Absolutely.
people are outside your front door with pitchforks or banging, banging down the door. But yeah, I think it's a good point. But it's interesting to note that you are a very analytical when it comes to balance, and I think that is such a huge part of feeling confident behind the decisions that get made in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think generally I try to be mostly analytical about it, but of course there's sometimes where like, something just feels wrong.
Mm,
So there are ways to adjust that, but the way I approach the solution is usually pretty analytical.
yeah, no, it makes sense, man, because these things can be stacks of cards, and you can't overly you can't make a decision that swings the pendulum too far one way, or
Oh
you're
yeah.
gonna wreck things. So uh, okay, so Dawngate, EA, you spent time there doing some community management work.
Mhm.
What was the next kind of phase of your experience, and when did the super evil piece kind of enter the picture for you? And yeah, take me forward.
So at the end of my time at EA, which was actually a pretty short stint, it was probably about like 9 months.
Mm,
That was when Dawngate got shut down, and immediately following that, my former boss actually reached out to, I think, Bo, who was the CEO at the time, um, and Bo sent me to Christian, who then asked me like, "Hey, could you come in this Sunday?" Which was like a day after I left EA, like 2 days after I
whoa.
left EA. So I was like, okay, sure, I'll come in and chat. And so I came in, and they were sitting in. Well, you're well aware of the office now.
Yeah.
There was actually another room attached to it before that, and they were also all sitting in that room and at a conference table. And I just went and sat with them. We chatted for like 5 minutes and they asked, hey, do you want to play a game with us? And so that was, I'd played a little bit of Vainglory prior to that just to kind of get a good feel of what they were making.
Mm.
And I was actually very surprised by how good it felt because as a PC gamer, but the thought of playing a MOBA competitively on a phone was mind-boggling to me.
Yeah,
like, I was
for
like,
sure.
I don't know if it's possible, but having played it like at home prior to coming to chat with them, I was actually like, this actually feels pretty good. And you can still recreate a lot of the things that you want to do on a touch device, which was amazing to me.
Yeah. So, and this was back in the touch controls era, or was it thumb controls? Had it evolved to that point?
It was kind of both. So there's priority on using touch devices at the time, so tablets. But we slowly transitioned over to using more phones.
Yeah.
And we kind of used both anyway, so it wasn't a huge difference.
Got it.
But they were all sitting around the table, and then they asked to play a game with me. I was like, okay, sure. And so I played a match. I think we won. I don't completely remember. And I, got dinner with a few members of the team. And then I left, and they're like, hey, if you want to talk more, we'll give you a call or send you an email or something. So I didn't really think too much of it. I was like, okay, I have no idea what to expect out of this. I actually just went home after that. And the next day, on Monday, I just was like, well, I have no job right now. What am I going to do? I'm going to start streaming. So I started streaming. And I was actually really surprised to get I got 1,000 viewers, which after not streaming for over a year, that was incredible. And apparently that was the impetus to get Christian to send me an email very quickly and be like, hey, do you want to come join our team for at least, a brief period of time?
That's awesome, man. You got to throw your swagger around. You were able to say look, man, I can draw 1,000 viewers. That's amazing.
Yeah. So they actually brought me on initially because they were about to launch Vainglory and they needed someone to stream it. So they wanted to do a live stream for their launch. So I handled the live stream for that. And then during the time I was working with them, this was only for a 2-week period. The end of the first week, they actually, Christian actually asked, hey, do I want to join full time? So I joined, I said yes, and here I am. But I actually started as more of a video content creator for the team. So instead of a designer, I was doing content work with Ciderhelm, Patrick.
Got it.
So we were making hero spotlights, we were making other videos for whatever reason. So stuff and we set up a community live stream too. So I think it was Wednesday or Friday, we would do a dev stream, which was a lot of fun, really enjoyable interacting with the community. And it was really a great way to kind of get a pulse on, what are people thinking? What are people up to? What do people enjoy? What questions do they have for us? Which is a great thing to use Discord for now these days. It exists. Because it's really easy to ask, hop in, see that people have some questions and, answer them.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the beginning of my journey with Super Evil.
That's awesome, man. How long did that season go, in terms of the content creation piece? And when did you begin to sort of step a foot into more design decisions? And when we're working in these startup teams, everyone tends to have a voice, and I'm assuming that was sort of this slow evolution, both for you and Patrick, because I know Patrick is a very analytical gamer as well. You can tell by his guides and his mind. And I love the fact that now, fast forward a couple of years, you and him are very much kind of at the helm of a lot of the design decisions going into Catalyst Black. So it's kind of cool that you guys kind of went on a similar evolution, particularly in your time at Super Evil. But when did that begin to evolve, and how did it begin to evolve?
I think I always had some pretty strong opinions on kind of the balance and design of the game, different characters, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses. Back when I first joined, I think that was around the time when Patrick was designing his first hero. So it was, especially because we live pretty close to each other, so we started carpooling pretty early on. But even before that, I would because we were sitting in basically the attic of the office, so it'd just be me and him. And so we would just chat with each other about, we think that, this would be a really cool thing to have in the game. This hero is too strong, etc. I think he's much more interested in the design of the characters than the balance. And I was a lot more interested in the balance of the characters. So at the time, I would just offer up suggestions to the designers of the time and be like, hey, no, I think that this hero is too strong. I think we should, these are ways we could buff it. These are ways we can weaken it. Um, and slowly I kind of got myself familiar with kind of how things were put together because
Yeah.
I had no clue before.
Like the
Um,
technical side of how the game works is what you're saying. Is that right?
right, right.
Yeah.
So I still am not a particularly good programmer. I'm pretty awful at it compared to everyone else who does any sort of engineering on the team. But I was able to slowly put together like a hero. I was able to make balance changes myself. And I slowly kind of inched my way into that design space where I was still working on videos, but during the downtime, I was also offering input on what we should change and what we should add to different characters.
That's awesome, man. And were there heroes that you were involved? Like you say, Cider had his first hero that he designed. Which one was that, by the way?
I
Do
believe
you
it was Scarf.
Scarf? Okay, cool.
I think he was number 10 or 11. I don't
Got it.
remember.
Did you ever do design work in that regard as well? Like, did you ever design a hero? And if so, what was your
Yeah.
first?
Oh, my first hero. I need to look this up or something.
I love it. I
Um,
love it. The
I did
work
a
is so
lot.
intense. Our brains just sort of like lose the
Yeah.
ability to relate. Dude, I have that. I'm like, was that a year ago? And I was like, no, that was 2 months ago. And you're like, oh man, that's so
Yeah. I did Yates. I did Batiste, I think. At least I did a lot of help on Batiste. I think someone else was actually the primary designer on it, but I offered a lot of suggestions on it. Um, a couple
that's
others.
that's
I
super cool.
I don't remember.
It's all good. It's all
All a
good, man.
blur.
It's all good. Well, talk to me in general about this season for Super Evil. This is clearly a time that I know very little about because I didn't work with you guys. I was also heavily, working and invested in the community around Heroes of the Storm at Blizzard, as well as with my family. Vainglory was a game that I was aware of and certainly appreciative of in terms of its place in the industry. As a kind of cutting edge competitive mobile game, built around touch, all of that stuff, proprietary engine, all the things, right? Like, but what was this season like for you, particularly from a company perspective? Like, what were the highs and the lows, the goods, the struggles? I want to hear your take on this season for Super Evo as a company, because we know the future, we know how it evolves and kind of where we are now, but talk to me a little bit about what that time was like with the team and what were some of the highlights and maybe some of the challenging parts.
Yeah. So I guess some of the highlights were just building out the game as we went, where we started from say 8 or 9 heroes and we built it up to over 40 over the course of a couple of years. And while like the development speed might not have been too fast with the size of the team, I thought it was pretty impressive.
Mm.
Um, Also, just seeing the growth of the community where we started super small, just in Singapore, and eventually it's grown to a point where people love the game, and every time we made a small change, you would hear from both sides like, "Why'd you do this?" or "I love this change," or everything in between, and just seeing that development was great. But from the company perspective, I think one of the most interesting things is just seeing new talent join the team, just meeting new people, being able to get their expertise, especially because a lot of people who did join Super Evil were experts of the craft,
Right.
where everyone would bring something really interesting to the table, and I'd just sit in my corner and occasionally walk over and be like, hey, what are you working on? And just getting a good idea of every little bit of game development was really eye opening. Where when we first started, some things might not have been completely there just because the number of people we had.
Mm.
But as we were able to grow a little bit larger, we could be a lot more specialized,
Right.
where people were truly masters of that one thing that they were doing, and that was really exciting to see.
Yeah. So cool, man. Yeah, I think I used to describe theater as what I considered the most collaborative art form because you can't put on a play like a living expression of a story, not a film, but like a play, one that you have to go see in person, right? You can't do that without the sort of involvement and investment of so many different types of people,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Set crafts people, lighting, the writers, the actors, the directors, the music, the costumes, the makeup artists, the you name it, right? I used to
Yep.
think like theater is so crazy because it's all culminates to this singular point of expression, and it happens. But a lot of people look to the actors and they think that's the play, but it's like, no way, dude. The play is this whole thing,
Everything behind the scenes.
yeah. And then you start to look at how games are made, and you're like, oh my gosh, like you put an order of magnitude of difficulty or order of magnitude on complexity around how games are made, and you're like, oh no way, this completely dwarfs that. Because
Mhm.
I mean, not to take away from theater, I think it's incredible and it will always be such a moving kind of artistic medium. But games, in terms of the ability to appreciate what you're talking about, the amount of specialization and kind of craftsmanship that can go into every single facet is incredible, and it's eye-opening when you see it for the first time. You're just like, whoa, this is so complicated. And the expression of this living interactive experience on someone's computer or on their device is manifested through this collaborative, multifaceted artistic expression. And
Yeah.
that's so cool, man. I
Yeah.
really find
Absolutely.
I really find games amazing in that way. It's like so fun to appreciate them.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. I actually think one of the most telling things about what kind of made Vainglory so exciting for people was also a lot of the live events that we had,
Oh, right.
where the tournaments were it was so fun to be at. Just the amount of energy, the amount of excitement, the amount of just like enthusiasm around watching like the two teams play against each other is just amazing, and the amount of like prep work everyone does. Like I ended up doing like shoutcasting for a bit, and that was like a whole new experience. I was like, I never thought I would be doing this at any point in my life, because I think back in before college, I was actually I was not particularly outspoken. I was pretty quiet.
Mm.
Streaming actually helped me get a lot more used to talking to people in general. But shoutcasting was a whole new thing, which was, you're talking just at everyone. Everyone's just listening to you. And you have to be like very quick and on your feet, thinking about like, this team is trying to do this. So I should be talking about what they're trying to do next, or I should be talking about what items they're trying to buy,
Wow.
what the strategies are going to be. And it's crazy.
Dude, that's so cool that you got to have that experience. Is really, really awesome, man. And I can relate. Like, I think there's a lot about your story and my story that has some overlap, because that skill of practicing that. And by the way, it's not something you get to practice without
Nope.
being in a live environment. Like that's the thing that's so surreal about the shoutcasting problem. Nowadays, I think people are doing it on streams and stuff that
Yeah.
you can sort of practice. But like back in the day, that was not a thing. Like it wasn't something that was happening. And so like to learn how to do it is to do it. And to do it, you hope
Oh
you're
yeah.
doing it well. And you look at others who are doing it well and you try to learn from them. But the evolution of that is fascinating. And the kinds of people we would shove in front of the camera and be like, okay, pro gamer who've spent years, a lot about this game. Now get in front of these lights and get in front of this camera and put this microphone in your face and be comfortable, by the way, relax, you're fine, but talk about the game and do it. You know what I mean? Like,
Here
it's
in
just like,
headlights. Here in headlights.
yeah, you're just like, wait a second, hold up. Like, this is incredibly uh, demanding, right? And
Oh
I
yeah.
look at people like Dreadnought, the one, it's funny, he's come up 3 times in this, but he's a perfect example of that. Here was this pro player who we were just like, a lot about Here's the Storm. Get in front of this camera and in front of these lights. Probably sounds like somewhat similar to you. Like, get in front of these cameras and talk smart. And
Yep.
it's like, and you know what? People like you, people like Dread, you figure it out. And I have so much respect for that. But you're right. What a surreal experience. And, you guys had quite a number of these large events, right? Like,
Mhm.
and that happened over a long period of time.
Yeah,
And
I think we had a couple at PAX, we had a couple at Gamescom. We did some like big tournaments in Singapore, down in
yeah,
LA, like all over the place. It's amazing how many people will just show up to a live event. Especially it's like we're picking, we're going somewhere pretty populated. I have no idea how many Vainglory players are there, but let's see how it goes.
wow, so awesome, man. And those touch points, as well as a developer, are really meaningful, because that's where you really begin to feel how much this game means to people, right? And how
Mhm.
much they have sort of built their lives around it. And I know BlizzCon for Blizzard, it's certainly a massive magnitude of order in that way, but represented such a important part of that for for the company, right? Where it's like, and you really need that physical touchstone to kind of make it real in your mind what you're doing and what your work means to people, right? And that's super cool. This idea of how do we figure out how to make this next chapter, how do we turn the page on this next chapter, how do we put together game two or a second product from this company.
Mhm.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like we're beginning to inch towards Catalyst Black territory. How are you feeling about that? What was the kind of ideation journey like? Is there anything you would like to share about that? I know you and Patrick, both, Q as well, who was around prior to this time, have been working very hard on trying to carve out a new kind of experience here that still relates to the company's strengths and its DNA in terms of competitive play, but it is something new. And what was that like for you guys? How did you decide, where to go and how to evolve the kind of product in the way that you have?
I think there was a lot of discussion around what we should do next. There was a lot of different meetings, ideas from all places in the company, where we kind of didn't quite settle on like the exact thing we wanted to make. But eventually, the kind of the core ideas were we should make something that is very friendly to players, where you are able to kind of pick it up for however long as you want. And that's kind of where the drop in, drop out piece kind of came from, where it felt one of the biggest, I guess, pain points of playing a MOBA on touch was, hey, you have to, you get a call. Well, shoot, guess you're out of the game. You need to get dinner. You're out of the game. And being able to allow players to still get any amount of progress that they want within the amount of time that they do have available to them, I think is extremely important, especially in this day where people are really busy. You're constantly, there's always something else to be doing. Like especially like if you're at work, you have a small lunch break. Hey, can you play a game of Vainglory? Maybe, might be cutting it close.
Right.
And you never know how long it will go. But in a game where like Catalyst Black, where the drop in, drop out mechanic does allow you to just say, hey, I have 5 minutes. Cool.
Right.
5 minutes of progress right there.
Yeah.
Is really nice. And in terms of the shooting and like the running and gunning kind of play, we did do a lot of prototyping. So we were able to test out like a lot of different ideas that we had. And we did eventually settle on just, third person or like I guess isometric view, where we're already very familiar with that from Vainglory. We know how to make those types of abilities feel good. So kind of following along that path where we were just like, hey, we could similar camera angle. We know we can make some subset of abilities feel good, and we're really interested in this kind of isometric shooter gameplay. I personally am really excited about Catalyst Black in general, just because this game I used to play a long, long time ago, back in I think elementary school, called Infantry Online, which was somewhat similar, where it's like, hey, you have like giant armies fighting each other over different objectives. That game went defunct real quick, I think, but it was something I just always remember playing.
Yeah.
And it definitely drove a lot of decisions for me around, what will feel good in this environment.
Well, let me play a little bit of devil's advocate. And I know as someone who has been a kind of pro player on the MOBA side, like you've seen the complexity of strategic play and the depth. If I'm a diehard Vainglory fan, MOBA player, and I hear you say these things about drop in, drop out, I'm going to say, well, how can that be competitive, or how can that test my skills? Like, how can that have the amount of depth or sort of importance or relevance to me as a gamer, as a genre like a MOBA would, where I really feel like I'm making an impact, or I'm, kind of leading my team to victory through smart decisions or strategic play. Like, how are you guys ensuring, or are you even ensuring, that level of kind of strategic depth is available to people? Like, to sort of counterbalance that, or do you feel like it's important? Like, where is this concept of skill ceiling in relationship to the accessibility piece for Catalyst Black, which I can completely agree with. Like, hey, let's keep this game super accessible, right? Like, because that's the world we live in. I don't want to sit in a queue for 10 minutes. I want to be able to play a game in the window of time that I have. And if I have to drop out, I would love to make sure that that doesn't overly negatively impact my friends or the people that I'm playing with. But how are you guys also trying to hold on to, because I get that sense, like you guys are trying to hold on for dear life to this element of kind of strategic depth and ability to make an impact as a smart player. Like, talk to me about how you guys sort of approach those things.
Ooh, I don't want to talk too much about, I guess, our loadouts yet.
Yeah.
Maybe hold on for later.
Sure.
But I think there's a lot of decisions you can make around how you decide to gear up your character, what abilities you want to take into the game, what other things you want to take into the game, that will really affect your play style. And being able to pick the right loadout for the match is really important, where you want to at least put something there that's coherent. There, you might be able to mix and match a lot of different things, but not everything will make it's like making a hero in Vainglory, right? Where there's a lot of cool abilities in the game. Not every single cool ability works together in the same way. Some are just more synergistic. Some are more, if you just slap two characters together, it might not work. But we're also one of the big things is every decision that you make in a match will likely affect the outcome for a victory or a loss for your team. Where if you're able to play strategically and you're able to kind of guide your teammates and help your teammates and outplay your opponents in just a straight up firefight, you will be able to lead your team to more of a victory. You might not be able to completely win by yourself, but that's not the point. It's still team play at the end of the day. That being said, this is a game with multiple game modes where some game modes will likely be a little bit more casual and some game modes will be a little more competitive. And as the game develops, I'm personally really interested to see what the community is looking for.
Sure.
Do they want more, hardcore competitive modes? And if they do, that's something I'm very happy to make.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. So let me ask you the question this way. Like, if myself and a couple friends get together and we just want to have the most synergistic, incredible comp where I'm healing, my friends buffing, this person is a glass cannon, like, is that possible? Am I going to be able to take my crew and just go wreck face on the battleground? Is that like a feasible thing?
I can definitively say yes, with a caveat. The caveat being everyone will be able to do a good amount of damage. Some may be able to do more than others. Everyone can have varying degrees of tankiness and supportive abilities. And it's just kind of up to you to put things together. There's a lot of puzzle pieces that we're offering you. And if you're able to kind of find really OP strategies with your friends, go for it. I'm very excited to see it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm sure you'd love to be at the mercy of those and figure out how you balance accordingly. That's the joy, right? And actually, there's sort of a meta game that goes on between players and developers in that way, where it's like, hey, show me what you got, And it's like, if we need to rein that in, we'll do that to the best that we can, right? And
absolutely.
Super cool. Well, you've talked a lot about Catalyst Black already. Would love to maybe get any more thoughts you have, both about sort of the things that you find most exciting or compelling about what we're doing with Catalyst Black. And I do think you've mentioned a few of those already and how they're innovative, like the drop in, drop out stuff and all of that. But is there anything else? And then two, what have been some of the surprising challenges going down this path? Has it been challenging to find the courage to make a game that doesn't really feel like has been made before? Like, there are some elements of this game that you can look at and say, oh, that's from there. Oh, that's from there. But there's no true sort of mirrored version of a game like this that already has proven success and a great track record and all these things. Like, what has allowed you on the design side of this journey to feel confident moving in a direction that is somewhat a new formula?
I think early on, this was actually a really big open question where we weren't sure what we were making would be fun. And especially early on in iteration, it's just, you don't know because you don't have anything to show people. You don't have anything to let people play. But I think after our first couple playtests, they're pretty rough, but I think directionally people feel like, hey, at least running around feels good. And then one step at a time, it's like, okay, the shooting feels pretty good. Oh, now the transformations are feeling pretty good. And maybe the gameplay isn't quite there. Maybe the game modes aren't quite there yet. Oh, but now the game modes are there. Now there's something fun to play. And just seeing the excitement that people have around just playtesting is
Yeah.
really telling to me, because if we don't want to play internally, like who else is going to want to play it?
Yeah.
But I think we're at the point where if we're just sitting, so we use like Discord for work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people see a bunch of us sitting in the playtest channel, and then they'll join. And it's like,
Yeah.
hey, is there a playtest? I want to join this playtest. Where do I join this list? Can I download it?
Yeah.
And to me, that is extremely gratifying.
Yeah, it's a really cool sign. I've enjoyed that as well. Like even when we know there's a playtest scheduled, like let's say the playtest is scheduled at a 3:30, like you'll see people start jumping into Discord at like 3:05 and 3:10, and they're like, "Are you guys playing? Are you playing?" Like it keeps inching forward, you know. I feel bad for Trey, who helps Trey and Craig who help set those things up, because they're always like, "No, dude, just wait, like 3:30, it's on the calendar." I know. It's so funny. But yeah, to your point, the really positive signs. And I think, I have a lot of admiration for the stick-to-itiveness around decisions that are brave in this way, because
Mhm.
as we know, like making games is super complicated. There's business pressure, there's creative pressure, like do something new, but it has to be compelling. And we have to be able to do X, Y, and Z with it. But it also needs to be fun. Make sure
Oh
it's
yeah,
fun. Like
everything, just
there's like
everything, right?
so much pressure around how to be viable in this kind of career, and the kind of confidence to both be humble in the fact that you're making new creative decisions. You need to be teachable in the way that says, hey, if this doesn't work, we're going to pivot or we need to change. But wow, this still feels fun. This still feels
Mhm.
possible. Like rather than just looking at a safe formula and saying, let's remake this formula. I think the thing that I've admired the most about your work, Patrick Works, Q, anyone else who's been involved in making design decisions around where Catalyst Black has gone, has been that ability to be like, yeah, but I think we can do it. I think we can do something new. And I think for me, that is a thing that I find so inspirational, because there's
Mhm.
so much stacked against really new. Why when there's, all these other
Everything else
safer
we could be
routes.
making.
Yeah. No, I mean it, man. It's like I get excited about that for Catalyst Black. And,
Mhm.
I think to your point about the team composition, I feel like there is a healthy balance of, skepticism, humility, um, analytical approach to, wow, really, like, did the numbers line up? Is this going to work? Right. Like there's a good match of healthy skepticism and disbelief even around our own ideas that I think will keep us in healthy check. At least I hope
Yeah,
so. As
yeah.
we move through this, because we don't have all the answers, and that's part of making games. Like you kind of have to walk through the wilderness a bit to know what problems you're gonna have to solve, right? Like,
That is for sure.
yeah,
You don't even know you have a problem until you run into it a lot of
yeah,
times, where it's like, hey, I thought this was good, but it just doesn't play well with any other system that we have.
wow, yeah, for sure, man. Well, dude, you're the man. It's been awesome. You're teaching me a lot day to day. Thank you so much for helping me adjust to life at Super Evil and even get caught up on how everything works. So I appreciate all the time you spent
No problem.
helping a noob. Uh, but yeah, man, thank you for your time today, particularly on a holiday. And I know the community will enjoy this one. They think very highly of you, as do I. And this won't be the last time we'll talk about Callous Black or Super Evil. So thanks for being here, man. And any final words or thoughts you have for the folks who've made it this far in the video and want to hear from you? Anything about Callous Black, the team, you, them?
Can't give spoilers.
Oh, hey, sure.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for watching this video, hanging out with us, being in our Discord, just being as part of our community. It's really exciting and really awesome to have all of you here. And as a spoiler, I'm not gonna tell you what exactly it is yet, but banners are really cool, and you'll
Yeah.
see what they are soon, and they are going to change everything.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's a good spoiler. Yeah, there's a level of depth to the game that I think the world hasn't seen yet, particularly anyone who's seen versions of this game out there in the wild, that they're
Your
going to
loadouts will
enjoy.
be very dynamic.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. Fair enough, man. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that teaser, that spoiler. That we'll unpack more of that as we move forward. And yeah, thank you for joining us, guys. If you want to get involved in our Discord, or you want to stay in touch with us over the coming weeks as we move forward with Catalyst Black, our Discord is discord.gg/Catalyst Black. Pretty straightforward there. We are trying to bring kind of gameplay reveals, new content specifically to Discord first before we do to anyone else in the world. So that would be the place to be to stay as informed as possible on what we're doing. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, George. Never settle for the lesser evil.